My name is Joy Labinjo and I'm an artist. We're in Wolverhampton Art Gallery at my exhibition, A Place of Our Own. When visitors enter the exhibition, they'll see predominantly large-scale, figurative and nude paintings of black sitters who are friends, other artists, and some are of myself. There are also a few paintings of plants in between the figures just to kind of break things up and I guess kind of give a more homey feel to the space. When thinking about the title, I wanted a title that didn't necessarily indicate that the exhibition was a painting of nudes, and I also wanted a title that was soft and gentle, and kind of thinking about the vulnerability that my sitters gave me in making the works. I also wanted to use the title to reclaim the nude, the black nude, and a lot of the sitters are in their homes, their studios, so I thought it was a nice way, a place of our own, to kind of bring all of these elements together. A Place of Our Own does feature nude paintings, but I had previously touched on the nude in an exhibition called Full Ground that was in Lagos, Nigeria a couple of years ago. Two works from that exhibition are featured in A Place of Our Own, and I wanted them here as they kind of indicate the starting point and show the change from there to the new works. And with the initial nudes, it was all about the figure and not so much about the background or the space that they were in. And whilst I really enjoyed that, I wanted to challenge myself a bit more and think about the environments we live in, what I could do to kind of make the nude maybe a bit gentler, but also more fun. So it's about the figure, but also the space they inhabit, which was a new and interesting direction, which I definitely want to explore further. As you start working, you get more interested in it, and if I had more time, I could have done a few different scenes and settings. Yeah, but these ones, I guess, think about the domestic a bit more. The first set of nudes in Full Ground were I described as being therapeutic and defiant, and this was for a few reasons. Firstly, it was the first time I'd painted the nude to show publicly, and secondly, they were made during the pandemic, and probably during a lockdown, I think. So alongside everything that was happening in the world, it felt very therapeutic to kind of come back to the body, and making the work really centered me. It was also quite grounding in the sense that all of those works were self-portraits, and I hadn't examined or kind of looked at my body in that much detail ever, so that was really transformative. Compared to the works in A Place of Our Own, I did expand it to include other sitters who are friends. And did that change it for me? In some ways a body really is just a body, and it doesn't matter who I'm painting, because when I'm painting, I'm thinking about color, tone, how to convey flesh, and that kind of thing. So, and I looked at my sitters in as much detail as I look at myself. But I guess it was different in the sense that I was very intentional that I didn't want the works to be just me, and I wanted to explore different body types and experience what that meant in terms of painting. It was interesting because, as you can see, there are different bodies featured in the exhibition, and when someone does have a larger frame, I can feel that when I'm painting, so that was kind of an interesting comparison. No less or no more, just somewhat different. And then one of the sitters is of mixed heritage, and her skin tone was quite interesting to kind of get accurately. You actually use a lot more white to kind of get that tone, so that was a new experience. But I really enjoyed the works. In terms of reclaiming space for the black female body, When I invited my sitters to take part, they knew that the intention were nude portraits. However, it was completely up to them how they positioned themselves, so how much or how little of their body they were willing to show, whether they wore underwear or not. And that was really important for me to make them feel comfortable. And that did inadvertently affect the composition, because whilst I did kind of direct some poses, it was more about how they felt comfortable positioning themselves. The way Black women's bodies are often portrayed in the media is an interesting one. I feel like it's often kind of features the Jezebel trope, and sexuality and desire are often at the forefront. However, what I also find interesting is that Black women, as much as all women, kind of enjoy playing on these things for themselves and for their own enjoyment. Like the denim boots featured in the paintings, my friend owns them, and she knows that when she wears them, they kind of have a sexual overtone. But reclaiming that, to me, is what made that powerful. It's not someone else saying, be a sexy woman, wear these boots. She owns the boots, she wears them when she wants to kind of embody that character. And I wanted to include that alongside the juxtaposition of bare feet. I had originally intended to use heels, but I just find it interesting how these small details can kind of change how a Black woman is read, a person is read, and I think it might help the viewer to kind of question what they think about Black women's bodies and how they feature. Because in some works, the body is just a body. In others, there are playful elements. And I guess it's going to force people to question things that they may not think about all the time. I identify as British Nigerian because my parents are of Nigerian heritage, but I'm British and I was born and raised in Essex and London. Despite not having lived in Nigeria, because my parents grew up in Nigeria, there are so many elements that were brought into our home. And for a lot of my generation, specifically children of the 90s, in terms of immigration, we all kind of have similar stories, which has kind of forged its own identity. If you look at music, there's a lot of us who are kind of grappling with two identities. And for me, what that really means is I am British, I'm Black, but my Black side is Nigerian. And when I talk about that in my work, it just means I'm kind of exploring my subject matters and themes from a very personal lens, from my lens as a Black British Nigerian woman. So in some ways it is significant, but in other ways it just means I'm exploring topics from me, from how I see things. So in a place of our own, it was really important in this instance that the sitters were Black, and they're actually multiple, they have multiple heritages. It was more the Blackness that I was wanting to explore. And I wanted to do that on a larger level, because paintings of nudes that I've seen in the past have always featured white women, often painted by men. So I kind of wanted to reclaim that. And I also wanted to make work that I wanted to see. Within this, I hope that all visitors can take something from the work, but that's why I made the decisions that I made. My relationship with Nigeria was kind of the reason why I wanted to explore the nude in the first place, and this began with Full Ground. That decision was really intentional because the nude within art isn't so commonly seen, and I wanted to cause some good trouble. I knew that it would stir things up and cause people to question how they see the female body. In terms of race wasn't such a big deal in Nigeria because it's a very homogenous nation. Most people are black. But what I was really questioning here was how female bodies are seen in the nude. With this work, I understand that it's going to be completely different to show here in Wolverhampton because we understand in Britain the nude to be a very traditional way of exploring the body. For me, the nude is kind of where painting began and where my interest in art began. So whilst they may be a bit shocking here, I don't think it's going to cause the same kind of reaction that was caused in Nigeria. So this is the first time that I've invited sitters to be in my work, and all of the sitters are friends, some are also artists. When I explained what I wanted to do with this exhibition, I actually didn't have to ask some of them. They were willing, they wanted to be included in my body of works, and they knew what it meant for me to have access to a sitter. A couple of other friends I did ask, but I only asked people who I knew would be willing, and then I made them feel as comfortable as I could in the process of working with them. So my process is actually working from photographs, mainly because everyone's just so busy and my paintings take weeks to finish, and I don't feel like I can ask that or afford that to ask any of my friends to be available for that amount of time. So what happened was I went to their space and we took photographs, and then I went back to the studio and made a selection from the photographs and worked from them. Within that, some of the scenes that you find the sitter have been manipulated, so some things didn't exist within the actual photograph, but that's a common theme with how I work. The body and the sitter is really important, but also I like to have fun with my work. I'm also thinking about how to kind of create something as aesthetically pleasing as I can manage. So patterned wallpaper sometimes features, patterned floors. These things don't exist in real life, but I find it really complements the image and painting as a whole. So my painting process is actually quite simple. I have a particular place that I get my stretchers and canvas from. And I always have an abundance in the studio, so I'm ready to go. I tend to work on a few sizes consistently, which you'll see within the space. So when I look at an image, I kind of mentally figure out which canvas size works best for the image and to tell the story that I want to tell. I unfortunately stretch all of my canvases myself. The stretching process takes me a couple of hours to build the wooden frame and stretch the canvas over it. And then next we go on to priming. That I probably need about a day and a half for the priming process because it takes a few layers and you need the primer to dry between each layer. So once it's dry, I sand it, reapply another layer, sand it, apply another layer, sand it, and then I can finally get going to painting. And my painting process is maybe not as complicated as people might think. So when it comes to starting a painting, say I've got the image ready in the composition that I want it, I'll normally print it out to scale, very amateurly, kind of fold the paper up into 8, so you get a grid of 8, and then I mimic the grid onto the canvas in charcoal and just loosely outline in charcoal where everything's supposed to be. And then I'll go in with a thin layer of paint to just kind of map everything out and check that things are roughly in the same place. Whilst I am a figurative painter, they're not necessarily photorealistic, so I have a bit of leeway in terms of accuracy. So a grid of 8 works fine. I map everything out, paint over it in a light wash of paint, and then I'm ready to go. I go straight in. Some artists use like an orange wash or a brown wash as a foundation layer, and I've tried that, and it doesn't help me at all. It doesn't help me at all, and what it means is if I've started with an orange background and I'm eventually going to have something white on top, it takes a long time to get the white how I want it. But everyone's way of painting is personal to them. So once I get going, it takes about 5 revisits to the painting to get it finished. And what that means is to get the richness that you see in the paintings, it's a lot of layers, which means I'll probably paint the whole thing 5 times in total. So paint it once, work on another painting because it's oil paint, go back to the original painting, and maybe around 5 to 6 goes, the painting is complete. What this means in real terms is that over a month I can maybe finish 2 paintings, 2 large paintings. The smaller paintings I can do in a few days, which is a really nice treat amongst the larger paintings. So I'm often asked why plants are included in the paintings, and for me it's kind of just an aesthetic decision, but also in part because I really like the work of Lucian Freud, and he's one of the artists I looked at in school when I was becoming interested in art and learning how to paint. And I also really like the work of Indojeka Akinyele-Crosby, who often features plants amongst figures in her paintings. Some of the paintings have plants in them, and in this case, they were in the sitter's house. She had them there. In others, I've added them in for aesthetic reasons. And then with the small paintings of plants, it's just kind of nice to break up the experience. It's also really nice to paint plants after painting figures. The process is really, really different. I mean, it's still working with paint, so similar in some ways, but yeah, it's really different, and it felt like a bit of a holiday and a necessary kind of mental break from working on the figures. So that's why I did them for me. In terms of the show, I thought it would be a nice way to break up the room, because once you walk in, you do have numerous nude women looking at you, and yeah, I thought the plants could break up the space and complement the interiors featured in the paintings. When I was invited to exhibit here, it felt like a really nice full circle moment, because I wrote my dissertation on the Black British artists of the 1980s, and Wolverhampton was really key in their research and what they did. Discovering the Black British artists was kind of the making of me as an artist. Before that point, I loved painting, but I didn't really understand where I fitted in. I wasn't so sure that I could see myself or even see myself becoming an artist. Nobody told me about the Black British artists. I discovered them independently when I was on Erasmus in Vienna and thinking about what to write my thesis about. But upon discovering their works, I saw that it was okay to make work about family, about identity, about domestic scenes, and that when you're thinking of subject matter, it doesn't have to be something grand or out there. Your everyday life is art, it's enough. And learning about the artists included in the Black British Arts group, like Labaina Hamid, Sonia Boyce, Donald Rodney, they gave me I guess, an inner confidence that I could be an artist, and black artists had existed before me, and they'd found their place and their practices within that. So for me, that was really important. And yeah, when I was invited to show here, it felt like a nice full circle moment from the beginning of my career to maybe 10 years in. In terms of what I'd like to work on next, it's probably going to be the same for a little while. So I tend to work in series and explore things till I guess I'm tired of exploring them. And what happened with this work is, because it's the first time I've painted the nude within domestic settings, each painting I did gave me new ideas for the next painting. And I felt like my ideas were getting more exciting as I was working on the show, and more interesting. In terms of the show, I had to stop at some point because I have a deadline for when the show opens, but I still have a lot more ideas of things I'd like to explore. And I was having a conversation with someone, and they asked me if I'd considered painting men. And it's obviously not to say that I've never considered painting a man in my life, but in terms of the nude and what that might mean, I appreciate that when viewers view the work, I have a bit of responsibility with how the story's shown. So if I am to paint men, I think it needs to be quite intentional, and I need to think of a way to feed that into my practice. When talking about including men in the work, it wasn't a conscious decision to exclude men from my paintings. I was just thinking about my experience as a woman and those of my friends and black women on a larger political scale. But I am interested in what including men could do. Obviously, the narrative is going to change in some ways, but we'll see. That could happen in the future. First and foremost, I hope that visitors enjoy the exhibition. I fully understand that the nude may make some people feel uncomfortable, but I hope beyond that, that it brings joy in the sense of what painting can do, what colour can do, you know, the significance of the figure and our bodies and how dynamic we as people are. I hope they leave feeling a little lighter. Yeah, and just, for me, a real appreciation of the art of painting is what I would like visitors to take from this, because I feel like sometimes painting gets a lot of stick, but it's a great, no, it really is a wonderful medium that makes so much possible.